Well, welcome. Today is Thursday, February 13th, almost Valentine's Day. Anyone have plans for Valentine's Day? I know my husband probably doesn't, and I don't. Not yet. Anyways, we'll see. We'll see, maybe talk about it tonight. But yeah, welcome to your daily dose of salt and light with myself, Nadine Ness. And today I have a guest. I talked about him this week that he was coming on today, and that is Frank Vaughan. If you don't follow him already, I'll show you what his profile looks like on Twitter or X. We were just having that conversation while we're getting ready for the show. It's now called X. So this is Frank Vaughan. He's a content creator. He's a personality activist. I say, how do I introduce you? And these are some of the things he said. And he ran in the federal election in the past as well. But with that, I'm going to bring him up on the screen. Welcome, Frank Vaughan, to the Salt and Light Show.
Thank you so
So,
much for having me. I really appreciate it.
yeah, thanks for coming. I'm just going to switch the screen so it's a little bit better there. We were trying to decide what we're going to discuss, and there's so much happening right now. Which
Well,
topic would you prefer starting with?
I think this period of time it's a transition period. It's
Mhm.
monumental change is going to come to the world. Has already come to the world. I think the time before Trump got inaugurated officially was actually from the election to inauguration was historic. There was so
Mhm.
many changes that
So much
happened in
happening.
other nations. So we're just at the beginning. There's 1,420 or 30 days left to his term. So we might want to settle in because I think it's going to be. I don't think we're going to come out of it the same. When the
Mhm.
United States sneezes, the world gets a cold, and we're seeing that right now.
No, it's true. And just even comparing to other former presidencies, just how much they've done in such a short period of time. And it's hard to keep up. But like the world was kind of already going in a bad direction. I do feel a
Mhm.
little bit of hope with some of the stuff that's happening in the states, the uncovering of corruption, but then it's kind of making us look at our own house. And with that, you've been reporting on a lot of corruption happening, and you gave me a just glimpse of the bleak image you have of Canada. Do you want to dig into some of the stuff that you've been uncovering?
Well, it is bleak in the sense that
Mhm.
there's a lot of bad news. There's not very much good news to have. I knew things were bad, but then when I really started digging into it, I started understanding that you can express the money laundering, you can express the drug trafficking, the export and the domestic market. You can express human trafficking. If you lump auto theft, which a lot of the cars that are stolen in Canada end up in Nigeria, it's kind of crazy, but you
Mhm.
can express the amount of criminal activity in Canada as a percentage of our GDP. So we have a $2.2 trillion GDP, and it looks like crime on a low estimate is responsible for 250 billion of it. That's 10 to 12%. The government
Wow.
itself is responsible for 20% of our GDP. So I often wonder if criminality is actually our second biggest market here in Canada. And I found this kind of shocking. I knew it was big, but when I tried to find government statistics on this stuff, I had to come up with my own math, and my math was very conservative, and I spelled it out in all of my videos, which are timeless. Um, in terms of if I put it out
Mhm.
a week ago, you're still going to get value out of it, and I hope people will find time to do that because it puts a spotlight on the scale of the problem. So when Trump is signing these executive orders that talk about labeling cartels terrorists, that talk about a border emergency, that basically, and there's old executive orders that go back to 2017, which are specific to what's wrong with Canada. Everybody thinks it's just about Mexico, but it's not.
No.
When he started talking about this tariff idea, and he said it was about border security and the drug trade and all this other stuff, when I started putting meat on those bones, I'm just like, they understand. They don't even trust the border services anymore with their intelligence. They don't
No,
trust our
they don't.
police with their intelligence. And it's not to say that all frontline officers are bad, but they have withdrawn their trust from Canada's official policing. And now you have this Kevin Brasseau, am I saying his name right? Who's been
I
named
think
as
so.
the fentanyl czar. He's been around for 20 years. So all of this has happened under his watch. So there's a lot there that we could talk about.
Yeah, I'm just gonna fentanyl. I actually had quite a few former police officer, Cesar. I'm just trying to bring him up here. I had a few former yeah, Kevin Brosseau reach out to me. What do you know about Kevin? Because like in the RCMP force, it's such a small world. So usually other officers will have experience with him. And like I haven't confirmed all of this, but there was um incidents of sexual harassment and stuff, and that's why he left the RCMP and moved to, and I did see like the cases where that was brought through the courts, not necessarily through the criminal court, but the just the private law, whatever you call that. I'm having a brain fart right now. But
That's okay.
like the thing is, he is like close to Trudeau. He was an advisor to
Yes.
Trudeau, very much on the inside. And we all know that Trump doesn't trust Trudeau. So I don't think he's going to trust this guy. He's as close as it comes to Trudeau. And there's so much concern about the foreign interference that's involved with Trudeau. I don't know if you had a chance to see, and if you didn't, I don't blame you. Not everyone can watch everything, but I had Sam Cooper on my show last week, and he dug into how much foreign interference we have, how much organized crime we have in Canada. And he's been recently reporting, since he was on my show, about how a lot of it, Trudeau is very much involved in the foreign, like he is very much aware that it's happening to him. And I'm still so shocked that it's not coming out publicly. What what I guess the foreign interference that CSIS have found, like the 11 candidates. But yeah, this Kevin guy seems just kind of interlinked. So I even tweeted about it. I said, I don't think that the US is going to be doing briefing, sensitive information briefing with this guy. I don't think they're going to trust him just based on his close proximity to Trudeau. And I don't think they should. But have you kind of dug into him a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's pretty easy at this point that the people who are
Mhm,
close to Trudeau are those that you can't trust.
mhm,
He was his national security advisor, or part of his intelligence and national security advisory group for, I think it was 3 years, and those are pretty recent three
mhm,
years. So while foreign interference has been taking place on our soil, I mean, even as far as having Chinese Communist Army troops here on our soil training, but that's just a more overt aspect of it.
mhm.
I read an article recently, and it was included in my videos, that in 2018, just the amount of money laundered in Vancouver was responsible for a 5% rise in the price of housing. So the housing bubble has only continued since then. And what
Mhm.
I've discovered, I used to think it had more to do with the mass immigration that we're undergoing. You can't put 1 million people a year into the country. It
No.
increases pressure on housing. And I thought that was the main cause. But what I've discovered is it's not the main cause. It is massive hundreds of billions of dollars of money that is being funneled through the real estate market,
Mhm,
hyperinflating prices. So the media, to that point, doesn't really report this stuff. And the judiciary, and by judiciary, by extension, I include the
yeah.
foreign interference. Well, it wasn't even a commission. What was it? It was a foreign interference. I can't remember the title they used, but it
Report,
wasn't.
or like the Hog
I don't.
report?
Yeah, I don't think it was an official royal commission, but either way, when they go through that and they find, and you read the document, they find all kinds of instances of foreign interference, but they deny conspiracy, and they deny that anybody's directly responsible, and they say that it's outside the scope of their mandate to actually name people. What you have in this country is captured media, and you
Mhm,
have a captured appointed judiciary. You also have a captured appointed Senate, where 85% of the members currently, and when Trudeau is done, it'll be 93%, are appointed by the sitting government, by Trudeau himself. So even if we get a new government, even if we get Polyev, and Polyev's intentions are perfect and pristine, he's going to face a captured media, he's going to
mhm,
face a captured Senate and a captured judiciary. So the reason we're not having the dots connected for us is because the industry, the entire industry of government and bureaucracy, and media is an extension of government. It's not just the
mhm.
CBC with its $1 billion of funding. There's about
No.
30 to 40% of media is now funded directly by government. But Canada's it's a very heavily dominated culture by its government, and we're finding out just how corrupt the entire structure is, and that the Americans are shining a spotlight on that. And I think now we have an opportunity as Canadians to highlight that, to tell the truth about that, and to make a better deal for the people.
Yeah. And you made a really good point. The media is captured, the courts captured, basically many of the politicians are captured. One of them that I think is captured even more is the bureaucracy on the inside, because
Mhm.
I talked about that yesterday with Frank on my show, because he's been uncovering a lot of the bureaucracy decisions that are happening on the inside. Now, how do we fix it? Like, I don't want to think, oh, we're too far gone, we can't fix it. Even when we get a new government, and if Pierre wants to do the right thing, he'll be facing all of these other challenges. I guess media, we can counter it with like alternative media, like you and I. We might be able to reach some of the people, but that's if we're allowed to keep streaming, keep posting, right? There's been a lot of like bills trying to be passed to silence us, but maybe if it doesn't come out here, it'll come out in the States.
I think
That's what.
that I think that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I,
I
I
was
think
done.
uh, I think it's Trump's narrative to build at this point. He is very aware of how corrupt Canada is, and he can slow roll that narrative, and he can take his time building that case. He's already started, but all
Mhm.
he has to do is tell the truth about Canada, and it will wake people up. Canada is very corrupt, and Mark Carney he's the
Mm.
guy that they're bringing in. And I call this guy the Grim Reaper because he was in Regina yesterday. And the message he's bringing is, I'm going to use the Emergency Act to fight with Trump. I will lock you down if we have supply shortages. And I will use Canada and destroy its people to oppose the Trump agenda. That's his message. I can't believe they can find 100 people to go into a gathering and even stand there. And the media is trying to make it sound like we have got Carney mania on our hands, that he is massively popular,
Online too.
that he's a populist, that he's an outsider. His name is on your money. He ran 2 central banks. He broke the wall between the Bank of England and the governing of the British Isles by coming out against Brexit when that was going on. He wrecked the pound in many ways. He's not an outsider. He's not an everyman.
No.
This guy is he's your quintessential World Economic Forum guy. He's your Davos guy. He's your UN guy, and he is delivering a message that so long as the Americans are committed to finding corruption and ending it in the United States, he is willing to, because this is something people need to understand. The tariffs that Trump is applying to Canada are not the tariffs that are going to hurt you the most. It is the response tariffs. It's what the government has on the
Mhm.
table to tariff your food, which is basically putting a tax on your food, to tariff the things that you need every day. So the
Mhm.
suffering of the poor and the middle class in this country will be because of the government implying their response. And Mark Carney said full speed ahead. And then you got Jagmeet Singh, and he's saying cut off mineral transport, cut off the oil. It will tank our dollar. We will have a 30 or 40 cent Canadian dollar. So your savings will evaporate. You won't be able to buy anything, and it will be because of the decisions of the government. Now, why? Why is the government deciding to do this? Because Trump has asked us to tighten up our border, deal with the fact that in spite of the vast majority of illegal immigrants coming into the United States coming from the southern border, 500% more people on the terrorist watch list are infiltrating the United States from Canada. That's a real
Mhm.
thing. The
Yeah.
sheer amount of drugs that are being exported from Canada, $500 million lab they busted. That's one lab. For
Mhm.
everything they find, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 100 things they don't find. So the
Mhm.
scale, and you don't even need the statistics. All you got to do is look around your cities, and you can see they're getting filled with fent zombies and meth heads and tent
Yeah.
cities and addicts everywhere. People, I saw a horrible video this morning from Regina Public Transit. The entire back of the bus is people wasted and drugged out while some poor woman and her kid are trying to get somewhere. you can see the evidence of your eyes that
Mhm.
that Canada has become a narco state. And what is the government doing? They're doing early bail. They're doing catch and release. So a
Mhm.
guy just last week got stabbed in Vancouver, and the same day the guy that stabbed him is back out on the street. There's no sentencing. They brought in C-75, which basically removed mandatory minimums and actually made it incumbent on the judge to further reduce sentencing. I mean, I could go on. I could just keep talking and talking and
They've
talking.
legalized drugs. They're providing the drugs for free. Like
That's right.
it's gone insane.
Have you ever, if you suggested that getting an alcoholic to stop drinking was as simple as handing them a bottle of whiskey, everybody would understand how
It's
stupid
insane.
that is, because we've
Yeah.
had Alcoholics Anonymous going for however long. But when it comes to hard drugs, the easiest way is we'll get rid of the methadone program and we'll just give them straight heroin, or we'll give them you got David's Dillies, so that's Diludad. They're just handing it out, and if they're not using it, they're selling it on the street. So the
Mhm.
taxpayer is paying for hard drugs for people to then turn around and sell on the black market, so they can, I guess, go get whatever other drug they want, because one's a barbiturate, one's an amphetamine. So you sell your barbiturates that you got from the government so that you can buy amphetamines from either a street dealer or the government. It's Canada's just massively corrupt, and we kind of need to shake the foundations. We need to pull the pillars down, because we cannot go on this way. And now you got Mark
No.
Carney coming in. He can be prime minister
Are
and never
you
have
okay?
faced election. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Are you okay if I play the video? Because we talked about what he was going to do, bring in the Emergency Act. There is a video of him doing this. I don't think this one was in Regina, though. It seems like a different room, but it was in, I think, Vancouver. Are you okay if we play it quick and then we'll discuss that even more?
Let's hear from the Grim
Yeah.
Reaper himself.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
He's using it to push like the whole climate change thing, and then he's using it to attack the US or Trump. Now, I just want to point out Canada has a serious TDS problem, Trump derangement problem. Most of Canadians have not looked into what Trump is actually about. They parrot the same kind of mainstream narrative that you've heard them say, the mainstream say for years about Trump. I used to be one of them. I used to have TDS. Like I've openly admitted it. I hated the man. And then I realized one time they twisted something he said, and I'm like, wait a minute, he couldn't have said that. And I went and watched the whole video, and he hadn't. And then I was like, oh, if they're lying to me about that, what else are they lying to me? And he was actually one of the reasons I woke up from this like brainwashed state. Canada is still very much there. How do we counter that?
Well, to understand why Canada is that way, you walk into a Wendy's, or you walk into a McDonald's, or you walk into a mechanics, or you walk into basically any place that you would get food or service. There's TVs on the wall, and they're blazing CTV or they're blazing CBC. You're being programmed. We have, and back to the point about having captured media. So captured media means you have a captured message. Trump is an easy target. He's got the orange spray tan. He's got the hair. He's got that braggadocious New York accent. So people often only consume 10 to 15 minutes a day of media, and that's where they get their worldview from. So it's very easy for a low information person, which is, I mean, clearly you figured out that there was something wrong with the way the media was portraying Trump. So you decided to dig deeper. You decided to dedicate more of your time. I mean, you're doing this, so you're dedicating a lot more time than most people would. And you dug and you found out you've been lied to. So people need to figure out, they need to have that moment. They need to have that quote unquote come to God moment where they figure out, I've been lied to. There's something wrong here, and start digging themselves. And the reality that Mark Carney is going to create if he has his way, and this is a man, he's never faced a ballot, and he can be prime minister. That's one of the, I've always said that Canada is one of the most backwards countries politically on the planet in the Western world, because we are. The people have no power. You have no say. You have no right of recall. You have no legal recourse when your politicians break their promises to you. And under the Constitution, Mark Carney never has to sit as an MP. He never has to face election. He can be prime minister with Jagmeet Singh's backing, and he can be there till 26. And under the Emergencies Act, they could delay the election even further. So the suffering that these guys are going to create will be the justification for them hanging on to power and taking more power away. That, I think, that process, because we have 4 years of Trump. This is really important. We have 4 years left of Donald Trump. So they have to make you suffer for the next 4 years fighting the Americans. And what are they fighting? He's trying to save his people's lives from fentanyl overdose. He's trying to stop terrorists from infiltrating his country. He's trying to kick out illegals, which are wrecking the underlying fabric of the economy. When he says crazy sounding things like these countries are emptying their jails and they're sending them to the United States. But they are. That's exactly what Venezuela did. That's exactly what Colombia did. It's not a conspiracy theory. He's telling you the truth. But you got to get past the accent and the spray tan in order to understand that. You got to go a little bit deeper. So he's trying to reverse this. I think they're going to bomb the cartels in Mexico out of existence, and they're going to do it with the blessing of the Mexican government. Mexico knows where their bread is buttered. Canada hasn't figured it out yet, particularly, and this is why I like what Smith is doing. I like the messaging coming out of Scott Moe on this. They're moving a little bit more towards looking after the people versus looking after the flag, because the people who are wrapping themselves, the Team Canada people, they hated the flag up until the last few weeks. They cursed it. They tried to cancel Canada Day. When they put a Canada flag on Terry Fox during the Freedom Convoy, they said it was sacrilegious. Now all of a sudden, Team Canada, which has been selling this country out, wants you to believe that they are the saviors. They are not. Western Canada in particular, all of our trade flows south. America butters our bread. Their capital is what makes us prosperous here. Our prosperity comes from them. We have one road link to Eastern Canada, and we have one heavy rail link to Eastern Canada. That's because we don't send our stuff that way. We send it south. So when these guys are talking about fighting America, the first over their wall to fight the Americans, the first people who are going to face casualties are Alberta and Saskatchewan and BC. They want us to be the front line yet again. We've had 150 years of being manipulated to the advantage of Eastern elite interests. And at some point, we in the West have to wake up and realize we need a new deal. And I knew this back in Ontario, and that's something, there's millions of people in Ontario who understand this.
I was smiling because no, I'm smiling because you consider yourself the West now, because you used to be from the East, and now you're fully entrenched in Saskatchewan, and I love it. It's making me smile.
I was
you understand it even more.
To be completely honest, I was Western before I left Ontario because I could see it, and there's a lot of people there like me. It's not like you want to be. There's millions of people in the East who get it, but unfortunately, they're outnumbered by the millions who don't get it, and they're controlled by the Laurentian elites. And if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, the Laurentian elites, they're not like the Western elites. The Western elites are a smaller grouping, whereas the Laurentian elites are bigger and more powerful. But the Laurentians, they don't have God. The Western elites still have it. And the whole setup is designed to advantage the Laurentian elites at the expense of the West. And I did a video, I think the second last video I did, I went through a history. It started from the very beginning when James Palliser came out here, surveyed the land, and identified Palliser's Triangle down by Medicine Hat and said it wasn't suitable for farming. So he went back, he reported that to Ottawa, and Ottawa said, we don't like it. We're going to send this other guy, H.Y. Hind, out, and he said, you can farm it all. So people came out here under that advice, and they lost their shirts trying to farm Palliser's Triangle. And then there's the whole CPR fiasco. And I don't want to get too lost in the weeds. The whole history of the West, we exist here in spite of the East, in conflict with the East. And the whole time, the Americans have been a better friend. So why are we not using this as a moment to highlight that it's American money, it's American trade, our goods, their money that puts bread on our table, not the East.
True. It's true. Sorry, I had to mute my mic. If you're not, if you haven't noticed, I'm starting to lose my voice. I've been coughing for the last couple of days. No runny nose, nothing, just coughing. There's two of us in the house that's like that. But it's true. And I'm from the East. So like you, I immigrated out west. I moved in 2007 was when I first moved. I lived in Calgary first, Vancouver for 6 months, and then Saskatchewan in 2009. But but I I don't think people get it until they've spent some time here to truly understand how it is. And I remember, like, again, I moved out west. I didn't quite wake up right away, but I noticed one thing that was very different is the West didn't depend on government the way the East did. And I'm going to show a perfect example of that I use very often in is winter construction. I couldn't believe they were pouring basements in the middle of winter in Calgary. And I'm like, how
Mhm.
do they do it? Doesn't the concrete crack and stuff? They're like, no, they have heaters while it's curing for whatever how long it needs to cure for. And I'm like, but in New Brunswick, they shut down construction in the middle of winter. Everyone goes on EI. And it's like this expected thing. New Brunswick is a seasonal type of province. Most of the people are EI in I'm generalizing it, but it was very much that mentality. But out west, it's embarrassing to go on EI out west. Like people would be ashamed if they had to use EI versus in New Brunswick, it was
It's a
actually
norm.
seen as a good thing. And
Mhm.
I just found it so shocking that mentality is so different. And that's why the Liberals have a history of most government spending. So, like you knew in New Brunswick, if the Liberals were in, you'd have more government jobs, more call center because it's a bilingual province, right? More of those government type of positions would come to New Brunswick. So most of the people would vote Liberals to bring that in. And versus conservative would come, it cut back on spending. And then yeah, like I had that mentality. I used to vote Liberal. And I don't know how you get them to see that though.
Well, there is a saying, and it runs something like, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you have no heart, and if you're not a conservative in your 30s, you have no brain. I think we all start there. Maybe not everybody, but we all start with some degree of that. It's it's interesting to me because Western Canada, and I've always been fascinated by this. This is the land of Tommy Douglas. This is where Medicare was first tried out in the world, universal medicine. And there's so many different things from co-ops to
Mhm.
the Canadian Wheat Board, among other things. Western socialism, and I'm not a socialist, but Western socialism I've always found to be very different because, and I've really started figuring out why it's so different, and it's because it's a community based style socialism that has individuality as its core component. So it's individuated socialism. It respects the rights of the individual, but pools resources. And why did it rise up in the first place? A lot of the socialist ideas that came out of the West rose in opposition to Eastern Canada, trying to survive under the yoke of Eastern Canada. So it's very unique here. There's this rugged individualism, but there is a strong sense of community and family.
Mhm.
I First off, I'd never been here. I'd flown over it. I'd flown over Saskatchewan. I'd only ever landed in Calgary once. I'd been to BC. When I moved here, we literally left Ontario we'd never even set foot in the new house that we were coming to. So we had no idea what we were walking into. But I've maintained since the very beginning that it was like a homecoming because the culture here, when I took my car to get my Ontario plates off it, because man, do they ever turn heads around here. I got rid of my Ontario plates. I walk in and just the attitude of people and the way that things work. And it was so much like the Ontario I remembered from the 1990s. In Ontario, I lived in a small town about an hour and a half east of Toronto. And everybody had their eyes down. They had their masks on, their eyes down. Even after the mandates were lifted, everybody was their own individual bubble. And they wouldn't even look at you. I come here, everybody's stopping to make my kids smile. Everybody's got something to say to you. Everybody's saying hello. There's a culture here that is just beautiful. And I just, more than anything, I want it retained. And quite frankly, I don't care what flag I live under, as long as that culture survives. And that's where I'm at with it. The Americans keep talking about the 51st state. It's not a bad idea. There's worse outcomes. And I know it sounds like a risque thing to say. They have the Constitution. They elect their judges. They have better state government. They have more accountability at every single level, and they got the Constitution. Now, maybe we don't want to go that way, but we need to use this moment in time to really examine federation and how it has, not just Western Canada, all the people in this country have been disenfranchised by the nation. You have no power. You get to mark an X, and then after that, you get to pray. And it's a really backwards state of affairs. You have even Polyev, and I'm just going to, I've been putting this out there in my videos. I'm going to vote for the guy, but it's not a vote it's not filled with all of my hope. My aspirations and my idea of what we can do, the most good we can do, is the provincial level. That's where I see leadership really maximizing the ability to hang on to that culture. But Polyev said he's not interested in equalization and doing anything about it. If he's not interested in doing that, he's certainly not interested in giving us a triple E Senate and making it elected, or reforming, or giving us a right of recall, or the right of the Americans. They get ballot initiatives so they can vote on law directly. They have jury nullification. So if there's a really bad law, a jury can kick it out. They can overrule the president, for heaven's sake. So sovereignty is dispersed in America. In Canada, it is highly centralized, and it only comes back to the people one day out of every 4. So there has to be a real honest examination of Canada and how backwards it is. And we either have to modernize it, or maybe we got to look south of the border to the people who have been feeding us this whole time. They've been buttering our bread this whole time. Canada won't let Alberta get its oil to port. Quebec is still saying it won't allow pipelines. We can't get a second pipeline built through BC. We can't get our product to other markets. So the Americans buy it. And if it wasn't for the Americans buying it, we wouldn't have any prosperity anyway. So why is the idea that the Americans are bad? They're more helpful than our own government in Ottawa. I'll stop talking now.
No, but it's true. And to understand this fully, you have to look at the sentiment, even just a glimpse online. A lot of the people that are 51st state people are people who are from the West, who Canada hasn't been good to. A lot of the separation sentiment has been building for years. I mean, you had the Buffalo Party, you had the Federal Maverick Party, that it's all out of Western separatism sentiment. Now you've got 2 groups out of that sentiment. They're like, yeah, let's just join the US, because then it'll be easier to make deals within the US. And then you have the other group that are like, no, we want to be our own different entity, but you're still going to have to negotiate with the, I think actually would make you weaker if there was a choice between the two when it comes to like trade benefits and stuff. But yeah, it's within kind of those 2 groups. I would say my husband probably falls within the 51st state, but not all of Canada, just Alberta and Saskatchewan, some of BC, and maybe some of Manitoba. But it's interesting to see just the conversation online.
Well, I think we might have moved past the point where we're going to get to choose. We're going to have to see how the coming months unfold. The world as it is divided. So China and the United States, they're tied together at the hip in terms of trade. So they can't afford to, they really don't want to fight each other. So I think it's very easy for China on their side of the equation to dry up the supply of raw ingredients that come into the country as drugs, because they stand to retain so much benefit. But I also believe that in a favorable environment where you had a Biden or you have a Justin Trudeau, and they're able to undermine us every single way. It's not just drug addiction. It's also what comes out of Hollywood. They've taken all of our great cultural creations and they've turned them into this woke DEI nonsense. Everything they do breaks down the family. But if you have a strong, assertive American president who is looking at a new modern Monroe Doctrine, which is saying, this is our hemisphere. That's your hemisphere. We respect your right to exist and have a sphere of influence, and you must respect our right to have a sphere of influence. In this world that is coming into being, this the way that I see it, I think that they would see Western Canada becoming an independent state as a security threat because there's so much Chinese money here already. So it might be down to, we either have to bring Canada back and renegotiate the federation and make it fair, or we become the 51st state, or we decide to let China have it. And the Americans they're not going to do that.
No.
So I think Carney is China's man. He's the globalist man. And his job is to check the United States for as long as he can. And in that, talking about redefining what it is to be Western Canadian, I see Smith doing some great things. She's been taking hits from the captured media, but she's the only one doing it right. Now, Scott, he's a little slow coming along, but he comes along. And the thing is with Scott, that people, I know there's problems there. I'm not trying to whitewash anything. But the fact is, when federal agents came into Saskatchewan and they started trespassing on people's land, he said, I'm going to arrest you and put you in jail. And they left. He's also the only one that has defied the law when it comes to the carbon, collecting the carbon tax. Now, it's only partial, but it doesn't get the attention it deserves. It's an act of rebellion. Like it's a very illegal thing that he's doing. And we're moving into a time where, picture this, Carney gets in. He decides he's going to slap tariffs, and he decides to issue an order. Alberta must shut down its energy exports to the United States, and we must shut down our mineral exports down there. We're at a point where Smith and Moe both have to say, no, we're not doing it. And they might have to ask the Americans for some protection because it will destroy us. And once again, we'll be the ones that fall victim in Eastern Canada. And more importantly, the people who are issuing the orders, they will never experience a day of pain. Mark Carney will never miss a meal.
No.
The government that he backs will never miss a meal. But the people here will literally starve to death. It'll be just like it was before when they were throwing their keys back at the banks because they couldn't make their mortgage payments. That is the moment when I think Smith and Moe have a chance to show their true character and make a decision to defy Eastern Canada. And I think we're going to come to that moment. I think we're at a moment in time where they got to pick. They're going to have to pick loyalty to the people or loyalty to the flag.
I just want to pause this for a second. My screen keeps freezing when you're talking, like every few seconds. And I just want to know if the people watching are having the same thing. It's just Frank that's freezing, not myself. Is the video continuing? Because if so, when it freezes, I'll just let it be. But it seems like when I move my mouse, it unfreezes. So if anyone who's watching, let me know if the video is coming out clear or if it's also freezing for you guys. But you make a really good point that I haven't really thought about. Everyone's saying it's all good. Okay. So it's just on my end. Okay, I won't panic too much about it. Okay, good. That's good. But yeah, it's so true. We're probably going to need the US to come and help us. Do you think Mark Carney is going to manage to find a way to stay in power longer?
I think that
do you think we're going that way?
I think if their internal polling shows that they can't win an election, I think they'll cut some kind of deal with Singh because Singh is he's irrelevant now. If he faces an election, he's likely wiped out and there won't be a single seat in the legislature. So what he has now is all he's going to have now. And it's not just about his pension. So I think if the situation is because before we get this answer, the 30 days that Trump gave us is going to expire. So we're going to face consequences. And if the government can respond and cause pain for people and blame it on Trump, then there's an excuse for Singh to back out of his 13th promise to pull the government down, which he always backs out on. I mean, if there's anybody in this country that's worse than Justin Trudeau, it's Jagmeet Singh. I think he is literally the worst. But if they do that, Carney can become prime minister without having a seat in the House of Commons, and he can do it with Singh's backing. Now, the other thing about Moe, I really just want to throw this out to your audience because there are critiques, particularly during COVID. There was a huge zeitgeist there, and I don't want to whitewash that. But I do want to highlight the Saskatchewan Firearms Act which basically nullified C-21. They created this huge, convoluted, bureaucratic mess. Then they said, sure, if you want to seize people's guns, you can do that, but you're going to jump through all the hoops that we've set up before you. And they basically made it impossible. There's the Saskatchewan Revenue Act, which is an attempt to take taxation back from the federal government. So I think this man is, and I knew this back in Ontario because I was watching what he was doing but while all this was going on, and I'm like, I think this man is ahead of the curve. I think his government's ahead of the curve because they're trying to reclaim some of that provincial autonomy. Even as much as there's been controversy about the $600 hats, I don't know if there's any legs on that, but the Saskatchewan Marshal Service is an answer to some of the issues with the RCMP, because all you got to do is go to PA. And what I can't believe is in a list of the 10 most dangerous cities in Canada, somehow Prince Albert wasn't on it. I covered that about a week ago, and it blew my mind. I was like,
I think it's because it doesn't fit the threshold for like the criteria that they had for the list. I think that's why, because per capita, North Battleford and Prince Albert have always been like number one, but I think the threshold was a certain population, and I think they were below that. Yeah.
Well, I found it really interesting during the last election here in the province that PA went Sask party. They actually, if I'm correct, they actually increased their margin just slightly, not much, but just enough. And Moose Jaw went the same way, and the Battlefords, of course, went that way. And I got thinking about PA in particular because I was watching those ridings heading in, and I thought, I thought the Sask party be weaker there, but they took it. And I'm like, well, why would they take it? And I think it's the Marshal Service. I think it's the promise of the Marshal Service now it's still not here yet. It'd be good if we could get a move on, but I think the Premier and more importantly, I think Daniel Smith are ahead of the curve. I think they see what's coming. There's going to be a showdown in Canada because against this backdrop, and you kind of got to hold all this information in your mind at the same time. We have a huge corruption problem, at least 10 to 12% of GDP being derived from criminal activity. Nobody can challenge that number. Some people have asked certain questions about it, but then when I explain all the things I'm not accounting for, I still arrive back at a very conservative 10 to 12% of GDP. That's huge. And you can't get that big unless there's cooperation from the federal government. And then you examine the fact that the Americans no longer trust our police to do their job, border services and the RCMP. That's a big deal. They have an incredible intelligence network, probably the second best in the world after the Israelis. They know what's going on in Canada. They know that foreign interference, we're in bad shape. And I think at least Alberta and Saskatchewan understand how bad that is. And I think I found it interesting. The Premier gave a statement, I'm going to say 4 or 5 days ago. I've kind of lost track of it, but he's in the Premier's office, and to his right, I believe it was to his right, was the Saskatchewan flag. To his left was the Canadian flag, and behind him was the American flag. He knows where his bread is buttered. He knows where prosperity comes from, and it is not the East.
In the video that you're talking about, he's showing how everything goes across the border for Americans and Canadians as well. Just how a farmer will have half of his stuff come from the US, and the same thing in the US, a farmer will have half their things come from Canada. And it was actually like the message was really good. I did let him know. I said, you need to spend more money on producing material like this because your message is great, but the technicality of it, I'm like, it's so amateurish. It makes your government look amateurish, especially if you're trying to reach the Americans. You have to step up your game. And he actually responded back and said, you're right. And I said, I'll show you. I did a video of what that video should have looked like. They could have easily used so many stock video to add it, but the message was great. But yeah, he understands that in Saskatchewan and Alberta, our biggest client for the most part is the US. But what do you think is going to happen? I think if Carney gets in and manages to stay in power longer, I think we're going to see that Western separatism going to go way up. And I think people are going to start to beg for Alberta, Saskatchewan to become the 51st state. But I want to talk about something else that have been waved by Trudeau. It's being peaked at by Carney, and I think it's one of the ways that they're going to convince the masses, brainwash masses in Canada, and that's that income, what the guaranteed income. What's the other term? So basically,
Basic.
where guaranteed basic income, where
Yeah.
it's basically bringing on socialism. So everyone would get money from the government, a minimum. And do you think that that's coming? Do you think that
I th-
that's something that will
I
be
think
like
that
the nail
that
in the coffin?
I think that might be a carrot they dangle, but before that happens, I think the Americans will just kill our economy. I mean, I don't. They're not going to allow a Chinese-backed communist state to form in Canada. That's why they're talking about the 51st state. It's not some kind of
Mhm.
idle talk. Universal basic income is an attempt at a
Yeah.
bribe, but the issue is the more the government prints money, the less your dollar will buy. And the
Mhm.
more they get into a trade war, I mean, you watch what happened the other week when tariffs were coming down. The dollar lost 4 or 5 cents
Mhm.
versus the US dollar. That's only going to accelerate. So it doesn't matter how much money they print and hand you. You'll end up like Zimbabwe or Weimar Republic, Germany, where people are running around with wheelbarrows full of money, except this time you won't have the wheelbarrows. You'll just have a credit card that can't buy you anything. Before any of that actually transpires, I think the whole thing will fall apart. And at some point, I have to believe, at least in Western Canada, I almost guarantee it in Western Canada. Eastern Canada might be a little bit slower, but that's not really my concern.
Mhm.
And that's to wake up to the realities is who is making you suffer, who is killing your dollar, who is destroying your purchasing power, who is making your life harder. And the answer is not going to be Trump. It's going to be Carney and his ilk. Um, if we do get an election and Polyev comes in, I think the reason they want Carney so bad, and I think the reason they're going to try and hang on to him is that there's a very real Polyev is not a stupid man. So people complain a lot about what he doesn't say, and they say that he doesn't say enough. The man is trying to get elected in an electorate that
Mhm.
is shot. We're
Yeah.
half of Canada is insane. They are insanely out of touch. Let me put that a different way. Insanely out of touch. So Polyev he's trying to get elected, but he's not stupid. He sees which way is he sees which way the wind is blowing. As prime minister, he is going to align more closely with the United States than China. It only makes sense. So I don't know if they can afford to let him win an election, which is why I think they're pushing Carney so hard because they know they can't go to the electorate because they will lose. A Polyev government is probably a way of stopping a lot of the pain that the Canadian public will experience. But the Laurentian elites, the Eastern elites that run this country, they have filled your streets with drugs. They have filled your streets with criminals. They have destroyed the value of your dollar already. We are trading at, what is it, 64 cents today?
I don't
Things
know.
are
I
getting
haven't
more
checked.
expensive. You buy a jug of milk. How much does that cost you? You buy a stick of butter. How much is that costing you? It's painful to just go to the grocery store. Um, and so
It's
at a
true.
certain point, the people have to figure out who is delivering the pain. And you can't blame the Americans for the problems that domestically plague Canada. They wanted it this way. They've made it this way. So I think eventually people have to wake up to that, and that's why I think they're really going to try and install Carney for a while, and it's going to hurt us. But
Mhm.
I'm still optimistic that even with the pain, we'll come out the other side of it with a better deal, and hopefully our premiers are smart enough. That's where my hope is. Polyev is a throwaway vote because the poor guy is up against it. He's got to deal with a
Mhm.
stacked Senate, judiciary, everything else. The premiers and their ability to talk to the Americans and engage with our trading partners, that's where the hope lies. And I already see with Mo building what I call the wall of Saskatchewan, just kicking out federal agents and all the things I've already said. There's already
Mhm.
some groundwork laid there. So I actually have a lot of optimism.
Mhm. And if Scott Moe doesn't have the backbone, I think within a few months that there's going to be people, without saying too much, people put in place to make sure he has a backbone. Like, I don't think people realize it's easy for us to say we don't have a say, but if you really know how the system works and you're organized, we have a huge say. So I talked about this like I've been talking about this. You want your government to go in a certain direction, or a political party to go in a certain direction. You should have a membership to that political party. You should be on the board of an elected official. So all the board elections are happening in the next few months. All it takes is liberty-minded people to show up. Like literally, you need like a handful of people, and you get to handpick who's on the board. And that's all happening in the next few months. So there are ways to, and you saw this happen in Alberta. That's how they got rid of Kenny. And I'm not saying let's get rid of Scott Moe, because right now, whoever is replacing him could be way worse. So
Mhm.
and I don't have another person in mind to replace him yet. So, but what I'm saying, there are ways to have direct influence. Even now in Canada, it's a little bit harder at the federal level, unless your party is the one in power. But in Saskatchewan, it is Sask Party, so the Conservative Party is the one in power. So you can very much make a huge difference. So
You
and I think Scott Moe knows that. I think that's why they don't ignore my messages, or my, when I give them a call, because we have 80,000 members we can direct at the flick of
into
an
action.
email,
Mhm.
right? So there is a way. It's just, and if he doesn't do the right thing, like at first Scott Moe was really not doing a good job when it comes to this whole negotiating the tariffs. He was like teaming up with Ottawa the same way he did during COVID. I'm like, what are you doing? I said, do you not hear what the people are saying in the province? And I think he had like a blind spot. And then the response was, yeah, we know you're going to start seeing a change in direction in the next couple of weeks. Just hold tight. It's starting to. And yeah, he did the change in direction. But sometimes I wonder if their bureaucrats are just like not in touch with like regular everyday people. So they'll do something, and then the people will react in the community, and then they'll respond. So I'm hoping he'll continue to listening to the people in the community, and not the media, and not the bureaucrats that I think have swayed him in the wrong direction in the past. So,
Well, I think you hit something on the head, and I think it's special to Saskatchewan, and I think it's special to Western Canada. There is an outsized people's influence here on political parties, and
mhm,
you're right. You're absolutely 100% right, and I know from being involved in Ontario politics that does not exist there. The same
no,
opportunity to sway Doug Ford and the PCs. If you even get close, they just kick you out, and it's the same with federal politics, with one exception. Jagmeet Singh's rise in the NDP proves that 10 to 20, well, it was actually about 20,000 people joining the NDP made him leader. They managed to successfully take over a federal party. Now, it's a disaster. He managed everything that Jack Layton built is going to be dust. There's going to be nothing left by the time Jag's done. But motivated people can do interesting things. And that's here in Saskatchewan. One of the things I do that I identified about the premier before I moved here was that even though he might start wrong, he still listens. His ears are open,
mhm,
and the party's
yeah,
ears are open. And it's fun. You mentioned production quality of his offerings to the public. I'm happy to edit for him, put a good word in for him. I'll help him out. I don't need any credit or accolade. I'll just work behind the scenes for him, no problem. But it's such a small, tight-knit band. They were testing out their live streaming capabilities during the election. So myself and my friend Kelly Lamb, who I think you might know,
yeah, I know Kelly.
I saw that the premier had gone live. So I called up Kelly, and I'm like, he's live. Let's check this out. So her and I got into this live stream, and we were one of only 3 people there. And they didn't know they were live. So it was literally like, it was all these staffers walking around, and you could just see their crotches. And I'm like, it's a crotch fest from the premier's office, and you could hear them talking, and they're having conversation like normal, as though the camera's not on. And I'm like, maybe they're going to say something stupid and CBC is going to latch onto it. So I said, Kel, what do we do? And she's like, well, let me call the office. So she calls the premier's office, and you hear the staffers responding to the phone call, and they killed the live stream. You can do that here. You
Yeah,
can't really do that in Ontario. So the potential, I really love it. I love how it's kind of an extension of what I was talking about Western socialism being very different. The kind of the kind of quote unquote socialist ideas that came out of the West were very different than how they manifested anywhere else in the world. It's the same thing now. There's 1 million people in this province. It's tight knit by default, even though we're spread out everywhere. It's so interconnected so that you can have an influence on your government. You're totally right. And I hope we can move them in a direction that resists those who have such tight control over everything. The entirety of Eastern politics is just a story of dictatorship. Here, it's different.
It's true. It's true. And I think that's one of the things that is really great about Saskatchewan. I saw it even more. I don't know if you had a chance to see my post last week, but Doug Ford was really pissing me off. And I'm like, we need to get rid of him the same way they got rid of Kenny. And I'm like, there has to be a way. So I like downloaded the Constitution, and there is a way of getting rid of him. You just need to get enough numbers. And technically, I do believe it could get done. But if efforts were even going in that direction, I think there would be a 180-degree change with Doug Ford. The same way like Scott Moe during COVID, I don't know if you were following me back then, but Scott Moe was one of the worst tyrants out of the premier at the beginning. He was one of the ones that used the worst language. He was actually really awful at the beginning. And then our group grew. And then we had a phone conversation. And all of a sudden he did a 180-degree. It's not because of anything I said. It's because he knew we could rally up that many people. It was 10,000 in the matter of a couple months. And he did the calculation. And he's like, okay, if I don't start going in that direction, we're going to be in major political trouble here. I think if people start organizing in Ontario, I'm saying this because we have a few listeners from Ontario, and I'm hoping it inspires them. If they can organize enough in groups, and I'm not saying go to another political party. That's not what I'm saying. It's just organize enough to try to influence the current government. It's way more influential. It's way more effective when you're not another political party. And I know some people who support other parties will say, no, that's not how it is. We saw that in Saskatchewan. Another political party did split the vote in many areas, and we ended up losing many seats for the Sask party. So that did happen, even though they didn't get elected. But let's say there was a massive amounts of people, hundreds of thousands of people that were to gather to say, hey, we're going to try to sway Doug Ford into a specific direction. And then they started a petition, because there is such a thing in their constitution. If a petition gets brought to them and they have so many numbers, I think 43,000 signatures is what was needed based on the calculations I made. Imagine they start a petition and they start getting 20%, and their whole background on why they're doing it is because he's not standing up for Ontario, because he's not doing this, because he's become a tyrant, because he's trying to threaten. I'm just saying, if they had listed the reason of the direction they want to go, I can tell you Doug Ford's going to start listening, even though there's a chance it would never be effective. But there are options in there. But most people don't know about the Constitution, have never opened it up, have never read it to see where there's loopholes. Do I think the party needs to do a lot more to change the Constitution to make it easier to hold the leader accountable? Yes. In Saskatchewan, we're really grateful. It's super easy to do that. In Alberta, it's a lot easier to do that. Ontario has a lot more, I guess, they don't have as many loopholes. It's very limited. But if there was a group that were to start organizing, I think it would be extremely effective. And they won't know who's on their side and who's not. Like, and that's the thing. Sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't know where you're going to get the hundreds of thousands of people from in Ontario. There's no will. I don't see the will.
Well, there's the will in 20% of the population. You just need to let them know about it. 3.2 million people in Ontario did not get vaccinated. It's a small percentage of them that would sign in a heartbeat a petition if they knew it existed.
Maybe. I don't know. living there all the years I lived there. First off, Ford is very popular, and I don't know why. Huge amount of political support. What just happened?
Oh,
Am I still there? Something just cut
yeah,
me off.
I
Anyway,
can still hear you.
he enjoys a huge amount of. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Can you
can.
hear me? Okay,
Yes.
all right. No, I don't know what just happened. Something failed. Anyway, I don't need that anymore. Because now I'm hearing you through the speakers. Anyway, he's very popular. He's seen as a person that can keep the dreaded Liberals out of office. I don't know why that's such a draw, because he's governed exactly the same as they would have. I don't think Ontario is any different. People argue with me on that, but I don't see what the difference is. There's still deficit spending. They still did pretty much the same things that would have happened during C-19 happened under Ford that would have happened under the Liberal Party. And, the most motivated that people got was in 2018 when the leadership election happened and we made Ford leader. And I was part of that. I used to be able to call Doug and have him answer the phone, and I'd see him at rallies, and he was very friendly. And as soon as he became leader of the PC party, he blocked my phone number, and that was the end. That was literally, I was ghosted.
Wow.
And that was the first warning sign. People got motivated because they liked the Ford name. They knew that Rob Ford had drug problems, but he was very different from his brother. He made all these promises in 2018. He didn't keep any of them, and he is a political machine that is rolling forward. And I just see, I think until there's more pain, I don't think people are going to get motivated on Ontario, because here there's a spirit. There's already a spirit. Even without Max Payne, people here care far more about politics in Saskatchewan and in Alberta than they're more involved because they're encouraged by the process to be more involved. Whereas in Ontario, they're kind of demoralized and they're outside of political involvement. Now that can change. That can change in a heartbeat when circumstances change. But and I agree with you, there are methods there, but the motivation, you got to get the motivation. And I feel people are demoralized.
They're so afraid of Kathleen Wynne, or whatever her name is, getting back in power, because that really destroyed Ontario. So I think there's that too. They have that fear of the Liberals getting back in. Yeah.
And it's a blinding fear, it's it blinds them to the reality of what Doug Ford is and how the PCs have governed. They're not that great. They're not that much different from the Liberal Party. So, people have asked me, if you're in Ontario, what would you do? And at this point, honestly, I'd either stay home or I'd vote for a new party, because I could care less who wins. I said one day a while ago, I'm on the verge of endorsing Bonnie Crombie because she's just more honest than Doug. Doug, he campaigns on being different. But his actions are so aligned with Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney. And the fact is, he allows himself. So there was the most recent dispute where Doug Ford ripped up the Starlink contract, and he made a big public spectacle of this. And he said, we're going to fight. We're going to fight. We're going to fight. Trudeau lured him out. He makes all of these public statements in the morning, and then Trudeau announces in the afternoon, trade war's off for 30 days, and declares victory. And Doug looks so foolish.
Yeah.
And it didn't affect his poll numbers. Didn't move it one bit, didn't move the needle. So I think there's momentum there. And until that momentum dissipates, I don't know if you can change the PC party. I hope you're right. I'd rather you be right that Ontario is on the cusp of doing something about their lack of choice, but I'm skeptical. That's all.
I wonder if the poll are for the party or for not the other party, and not necessarily for Doug Ford. I'd be curious if there was a polling to ask the Conservative voters if they would prefer a new leader. Has anyone done that polling?
You have actually touched on something that that is very true. They have done that polling, and the irony is, the vast majority of Ontario hates Doug Ford. According to polls, his approval rating is in the tank. Yet his support is 20 some points above his approval. And you're probably right. They're probably voting against.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the NDP. The shadow of Bob Rae. I can't even believe that Bob Rae is still involved in politics. He gets on TV and he talks, and it's like, after what that man did to Ontario, how is anybody even still listening to a word that comes out of his mouth? The now Liberal. So they don't want the NDP, and they certainly don't want the Liberals back, because they see the Liberals as Kathleen Wynne. But what they don't see, at least electorally, when it comes to voting, they don't see that Ford isn't that different from the Liberal Party of Ontario. So you're right. I think they are voting against more than voting for. And his personal popularity is virtually non-existent. It's 20 points below how he polls in elections, which is, Ontario's in a weird spot, isn't it?
Yeah. But it just confirms how, if there was a massive campaign to replace him as the leader, it's not an anti-party campaign. It's an anti-Doug Ford. I think it could be very effective if the right person was leading it. But most of the time when you... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the energy that would be required for that to manifest, I think right now is divided in two directions. You have True North with Randy Hillier and Derek Sloan, and then you have New Blue with Jim Karahalios. Now, out of those two options, I'm all about New Blue. But the energy to change something, or the energy, any good political movement has to have a core leadership, and that core leadership is what motivates the mass towards change. You would be part of that core leadership as the brilliant leader of United Grassroots. That leadership, that kernel of leadership, is divided into those two directions. So it's not manifesting within the PC party; it's manifesting outside of it,
No,
and
they
it's
all
stunted.
left.
It's not working. It's not gathering momentum. It's just kind of stymied. It's kind of like the PPC federally. It's just, it's there, but it's past its prime, and it's not gathering any steam. So you kind of have to have the moment. You're right that the seeds are there, but it all has to get brought back together and concentrated in a new direction. And so I think events are going to dictate when that happens, more than I think we're waiting. I think we're waiting for that moment in Ontario. I think that's all there is to do, is wait for the public to realize their frustration, probably through suffering, unfortunately, under Mark Carney and Team Canada.
And one thing that I find too, that I've personally experienced, that is, anyone who kind of starts to rise in like influence or a voice that people listens to, all these new political party tries to pull them in to be like the party voice or to run for office. So, and I've personally experienced that in Saskatchewan. So I was, attempts as pulling me into the new political party, Sask United, was very much happening. And I'll be honest, I was like fooled a little bit and going in that direction. But one thing I realized, like, if you're attached to a political party, your motivation or your reason for what you're doing very much gets clouded, because now you're pushing an entity instead of the mission, instead of the purpose, and that's why, like, it was so easy for me to disassociate myself with that, because I'm like, no, I just want the province to go in the right direction. I don't care which party does it. I will work with whoever will go in that direction.
Right.
And I cut my ties. What we need is more people in leadership roles or influential roles coming together and say, I don't care about political party. To be honest, I'm disenfranchised by politicians and political people. It's such a dirty world. But I want my province to go in the right direction. This is the avenue that's most feasible, that you don't have to wake up as many people. And like the Ontario Party, you wouldn't have to wake up the masses. You just have to get the people to take control of that vehicle. And imagine if all the people with the New Blue and whatever the other one is, True North, imagine if all of those people were to come together. It would take a year, and they would have full control of the party in Ontario. They would just need to be organized and strategize. And technically, most of those people were in the Ontario Party to begin with. They left because they were disenfranchised. They left because they got pissed off and got their feelings hurt. And then were like, I don't want to have anything to do with somebody who's hurt me. But yet not realizing they could have actually gotten the party to go in the right direction if the masses had stayed and organized and strategized and got policy passed at the AGM. But yeah, most people don't know how the structures work. And the people who want to be politicians themselves, the people who it's about them, not about the purpose, will be like, well, I'll never be a politician with an Ontario party. So I'm going to run in this one because I might have a chance. And I'm not trying to attack here. I just, I know personally, if that's what I wanted, I would have had a chance to run in Sask United in a heartbeat. I probably would have ran for leadership if that's what I wanted. But I don't think it would have advanced the province to begin with. I think it would have just clouded my judgment. It would have clouded what I'm doing every single day. And I would rather care more about the direction of the province and my kids' future than a political opportunity. But how do you get
Well,
people to go in that direction? I don't know.
when you adopt a political party, you adopt a banner, and that banner
Mhm.
is what matters more than what you're saying. So inevitably, even when I ran, 90% of the things that came out of my mouth were 100% authentically from me. But there was that 10% where you're engaged in talking points, or you're engaged in promoting not something you don't believe in, but something you would rather just not deal with.
Yeah.
And that's, if I ever got involved in politics again, it would have to align perfectly with my, like, I wouldn't be able to I would have to be free to be me under that banner. I wouldn't be loyal to the banner, because the idea is, speaking of Saskatchewan, the idea is to promote the people's welfare in Saskatchewan rather than promote the welfare of the party, which all too often happens.
Mm.
I was reading last night about Romano and the minority government of 1990. Was it 5? Might have been 1995. But anyway, they got exactly half the seats in the legislature. The Sask party took 25 and the Liberals took 4. And so they had to think about a coalition government. And so they went into a meeting and asked the Liberals, what do you want? And they just said, cabinet post. That's it. That's what we want. We don't need anything else. We just want to be in cabinet. And so the Liberal Party traded its future to align with the NDP to create this government, and the Liberal Party's dead because of it. That's kind of the flaw of politics. Now it's interesting too when I look at Sask history and I go back to Blakeney and the NDP and previous CCF years, at how fiscally conservative they were. And that's the other difference with Saskatchewan socialism, old Saskatchewan socialism. Tommy Douglas was a man of God, and there was a lot of God involved in the NDP back then. And I think it's such a huge difference, because socialism everywhere else is godless. This was socialism with God. Really interesting stuff. And I think maybe the NDP in this province, where it's lost its way, is it's become far more radical and in alignment with the leftist philosophy that's plaguing this country. There is a scenario where you could reclaim the sanity of the other party too, and they could come back towards the center, and they could get rid of some of the extremism that they've invited into their ranks, because it is extreme. It was one of the reasons during the Sask election why I was so scared of the NDP actually forming a government, and they came close. 2,000 votes in 4 ridings, and we are governed by 43% of the vote, and the Sask party sits in opposition at 52. Like, we were far closer than the numbers.
They have radical MLAs.
Very
radical. But the problem is the public doesn't know, because they don't see it. The media will not report the crazy NDP MLA. They very much they basically hid it from the people.
Well, when you go through the org chart, whether it's Regina Leader Post or Media, Saskatoon, you go through the org chart, and what you find is it's the same parent companies and it's the same funding. The media here is captured too. So you weren't told. You're right. You're very right. And this is why I got so loud about it. I'm just like, this is not the NDP of Blakeney. This is not the NDP of Douglas, or the CCF of Douglas. This is something else. And if you do this, it's going to be Alberta 2.0 when they put Notley in there. They're still trying to undo what Notley did, because it's not, those parties were founded here. They have their roots here, but they have grown into something completely different. And there's a lot of people in Saskatchewan even that don't understand it. They think of the NDP, they're older, they've been around longer. I'm not insulting them.
Old school
But they think of the
NDP,
NDP as the NDP of Blakeney or Romano. It's not the same thing. And I know Romano's not looked back on fondly, but you got to say, on the other side of it, the progressive conservatives under Devine, they spent the country broke. Like it wasn't the NDP. Romano inherited a very difficult task, and he's remembered for closing of the rural hospitals, and he's remembered for all these different cuts. But it was Devine that set him up for that. And you're coming into a situation federally where the Liberals have spent the piggy bank dry, and they're going to hand that over to Poilievre, and he's going to take the fall for all of it. So I kind of got lost in the weeds there, but I feel like I serve politics better on the outside than I do on the inside.
It's the same for me. Like, I probably could run, and people have asked me if I would, but I'm like, then who's going to work on swaying public opinion? Because once you become a politician, you become a talking piece, and not just that, you are less effective in many ways at swaying public opinion, because they see your motivation as being politically motivated for your own personal politics, or not own personal politics, but your own job, versus being motivated for the cause. And I'm not saying that there's not any politicians out there that are not motivated for the cause. I think a lot of people go into it in order to kind of bring on change, and then realize it's really hard to do. But I think you and I, when we, or people like us who build a platform, who have a lot of listeners, who have a lot of reach, can be major influence for politics by just swaying public opinion and like helping people learn of what's actually happening. I'm curious though, like, and this is live, this is what I would be talking to you if you were sitting on my couch. I'm like a problem solver. Like I see a problem, like I want to fix it. But I'm curious as to, if we were to gather all the conservative voices, like even just in Saskatchewan, and say, okay, when Scott Moe announces something that's great, the mainstream media is not going to report on it, or they'll twist it. What if we collaborated to kind of help the rest of the province find out, okay, this is what's actually happening? What if there was like a collaborations with conservative voices in Saskatchewan? I think that would be like really beneficial, and it'd be the counter to like the mainstream narrative. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
Well, I think cross promotion is a good thing. I mean, you and I are talking right now, and this is a form of cross promotion. I think time is the number one factor, because every day that goes by, people are getting their news outside of the media environment. More and more people. Every graph and chart and data point points to the fact that people are more and more getting their news not from the mainstream media. So I think time is a factor. I think building our audiences is a factor. I think the more voices that are out there with integrity, the better it is. And I think the more voices that aren't playing politics, because I don't want to make alternative media sound like it's one big panacea or cornucopia, or it is the ultimate, because there's a lot of influencers out there that are literally just generating content for clicks. They're chasing pennies in front of freight trains, and they sacrifice their integrity to just generate content every day. And it bothers me. But it takes all kinds. You need people, and you need to elevate people who are dedicated to telling a story, who are dedicated to getting the truth out there as best as they can find it. Everybody's going to be wrong sometimes, and aren't doing it to generate clicks. They're doing it because they believe in it, because they're trying to build something different. And as long as we have a responsive government, so as we've talked about here about Moe's capacity to listen, as long as you have a government that has the capacity to listen, you don't need to be in politics because you're
Mhm.
out there taking the temperature of the culture, taking the temperature of the public mind, and shaping the public mind. The best scenario, I think, in a situation that we're in, is that the politicians are always testing the wind, and we're the ones guiding the sails and blowing that wind. We're the ones that are we're the thing they're measuring. And if we do our job properly, then they will go. They will follow where led.
Mhm.
And another thing that comes to mind is if you don't care who gets the credit, there's no limit to the good that you can
No,
do. So
exactly.
let Mo or the leaders in the SAS party, let them take all the credit. As
Mhm.
long as they're going in the right direction, who cares? And that's kind of our job. It's steering the
Mhm.
ship. It's steering the cultural direction, which we're doing.
Yeah, I love that you address that because that's something too that you'll notice some people want to take credit and I'm going to be critical here, but you saw this in Alberta happen where someone wanted the credit for some of the work that was done, but in taking credit, it did damage to to the political party. It take to like they were getting hit after hit after hit, and it's very rare that I will talk about or brag about some of the stuff our organization does in the background because I don't want to give a target to the politicians. And that's literally what happens. And we learned this really quickly during COVID. Like even when just when I said publicly that Scott Moe had given me a call back during COVID, for weeks the media was attacking him for contacting me. And I'm like, we have 10,000 people. It's not a small group. And but yeah, they were like not just attacking me, just calling me like insane things. Like thankfully, I didn't back away and I kept going. But they even went to the point of filing false complaints against my husband with the College of Physicians. Like it was insane. Like we went through a hard time. But so we learned, okay, don't take credit for anything. If they're going in the right direction
That's right.
because of work you've done, l- just don't say anything because if you say something, then they'll be attacking the politicians. They'll say, "Oh, they're so extreme. They're working with these people. They're doing this, they're doing that." I'm like, even we ran, well, we didn't. We helped a whole bunch of people run in the school board election. I won't say how many got elected, but basically I'll say 87% of the people we ran won.
I know at
So
least one that did. I know at
but
least one.
but you don't see me scream it from the mountaintop because you know what? It's going to put a target. They're going to be like,
Well,
who helped you win? Like so
so that's
we're just not going to talk about
you.
it. We're going to cut it now. But
You're nailing it. I mean, it's basically you have to if you care about the outcome, if you care about the results, you need to
mm,
be um shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves or whatever the
why is
I,
that
I'm
why is this a serpent innocent as a dove? I think that's the
there you go. That's it.
yeah.
But there's you'll never hear me talk about there's a number of people I answer the phone for that are way above my pay grade. And we have conversations. You'll never hear me name them. When they come out in public and they do something that I like, you'll never hear me take credit for it or fight for or get into that ego battle of
Yeah,
fighting
yeah.
for who did what and who said what first, because it's so funny. I hear this all the time about certain public figures. It's like they got great ideas. They don't have a monopoly on ideas. Ideas are shared. One person expressing your idea in the way you like is one person out of millions who probably have the same idea. What's important is moving the idea forward.
Mhm.
So let other people fight over who said what first, because that it's such a ridiculous distraction, and fixate on results. You've got kids, I've got kids. We want to see their future get better. And the way we don't do that, the way that we stand in the way of our own objective is by demanding that we get credit for every little bit of
Mhm.
influence that we have. We don't need that. Look at the group that you've assembled. Look at the people who follow my work. They got here organically. I didn't beg
Mhm.
them for it. I didn't do it by beating my chest and saying, "Look at me, I'm so
Yeah.
great." I just put it out there. And when the phone answers and somebody needs some advice, I give it to them.
Mhm.
You know, and it's like, I don't send them an invoice. I'm not running a consulting house. Some of these people wouldn't want to be associated with me publicly because it wouldn't make sense to be for all the reasons that you're saying.
Mhm.
But they're listening. And if you have a government that listens, that's a platform to build on. That's like
Yeah.
that's the most important part, is having politicians that are responsive to the public mind. And so, yeah, I think you're doing great.
The dilemma that we, even as an organization, we talk about this during our board meetings. The biggest dilemma is like, okay, we can't brag, we can't take credit, we can't say publicly everything we're doing, but the problem is then people see our organization, they're like, they're not doing anything. Like, right? So we're like asking for donations to help train candidates who got elected, or to do an event to train conservative activists on how to do proper messaging, social media, and all of that. We're asking for donations for an event, but nobody donates because they're like, what have you been doing the last year? I'm like, we can't tell you.
Well,
So
there's obviously
it's
a balance.
difficult. Yeah.
There's obviously a balance to be had there. And I think, you know, like there's times where you can talk and point at what you do,
Yeah.
without outing. Like, you have to strike that balance.
Mhm.
And organic growth is slower than what would you call it? Hype growth. So you can hype yourself.
Yeah.
You can be a Chris Sky. You can be any number of other personalities. I don't have a hard time talking about Chris Sky. I don't really care what he thinks of me. But like, you can go that route and you can
Yeah.
blow up, and then you can fade away because it was all false in the first place, or you can incrementally grow. And you know, that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been incrementally growing over the years, and that's more powerful long term than
Mhm.
exponential growth. So you have grown an organization, and it's beautiful. And it might feel slow, or it might feel like you're not getting there as fast as you wish. But what you have underneath you is far more rock solid than the Chris
Mhm.
Skies of the world. The ground is moving under their feet all the time, but you're standing on terra firma. So
Mhm.
draw some comfort from that.
Yeah,
And
I was
you're getting
in,
results.
yeah, true. And I'm not I'm not trying to complain. I'm just saying it was one of those dilemmas. We're trying to figure it
Sure,
out. Like,
sure.
how do
Yep.
we get funding? Because we obviously, what we've been able to accomplish here in Saskatchewan, we'd like to see all over Canada, because some of these policies we're fighting are federal. And I'm like, if the people only knew. And so we're like, well, how do we grow? And we have no funds. We're doing all of this. No one gets paid. I don't get paid. I haven't gotten paid a cent. I got, when we were doing all the town halls, I asked them to cover the cost of childcare, and that was it, just because it was going to be such a big sacrifice. But I still have childcare and I still don't get paid. So we're actually taking a loss, if we're
Yep.
honest. Um, and I'm not working. So other than this, but I was talking to someone in the States, and he compared our movement and our organization to the Tea Party in the US. So I don't know if you've been following the US politics, but he said
Sure.
the difference was the Tea Party, there was a ton of money behind it.
Mhm.
And but because there was a ton of money, it was very much hyped up. But the grassroots behind it, the boots on the ground behind it was all hype. So the second that money dried up, it became nothing. And he said, you don't have the money, but you have the people, which is even more valuable. And it was like a wake up call. I'm like, yeah, you know what? We don't need the money. It's people who actually care about
Mhm.
this. They're not getting paid to help. They're not getting paid to volunteer, but they're working because they care more about the mission than anything else. And so he says, what you've built, we've tried to do in the US. It hasn't worked. Anything that's grown is because money's put behind it, and it eventually fizzles out, he says. So keep going. And it was a big source of encouragement. But okay, sorry, I went ranting there. I want people
That's
to
okay.
know how they can follow you. So I've got your website here, frankvaughan.ca. So I'm just going to bring it up on the screen. So I guess this is where you post a lot of your videos. People can comment. This is
Yeah, I mean,
actually cool.
It's I mean, it's mainly YouTube and X. I used to be on Facebook, but I stopped. I might end up going back one day, but if you click it actually looks like an RSS link. It'll take you to YouTube. But if you just search my name, um,
Oh,
I pretty
cool.
much have good control of my name. If you do a Google search, you'll find me. But yeah, frankvaughan.ca, or search for Frank Vaughan on X, you'll find me, or search for Frank Vaughan on YouTube and you'll find me.
I'm going to need to get you to give me some tips. I have someone working on a website for myself soon. If you Google my name, you'll see all the hit piece written about me, but which I call glaring review of the things that I've done.
Yeah.
But
Well, I get the same thing. Like everything goes back to 2019 when I ran for the PPC, so I'm going to be
oh
living with
yeah,
that till the end of time. So I don't care. People
that's
people either
okay.
figure it out or they won't, and they do. They keep coming, so it
That's
can't be
good.
hurting me that much.
So yeah, if they follow you on Twitter, I'm just going to bring up quickly here your handle again. Give me 1 second. So is it I at the end?
Yep. Yeah, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because I'm like, that's such a tricky name because someone could easily fake you. But
Yeah.
here, I'm gonna bring it up on the screen. Okay, sorry, I might have given someone an idea. Here,
If
if
all the
you can
trolls come
see
after me today, it's your fault.
FPV, so Frank Papa Victor, AUGHANIIII. Or did
Yeah.
I say one too many? Anyways,
No,
so
it's
that
fine. Or you can just type the name in and it'll pop up too.
it'll pop up. Okay.
Or you can click on the link on the website. If you want to find me, you'll be able to. Yeah.
We should do this again. This was really fun. It
For
was
sure.
like really like a conversation. Maybe we can do like a regular thing where Frank and Nadine takes on Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan take or something. I
I'm
don't
up
know.
for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm up
yeah.
for it for sure.
You and I, our politics are very much similar. So, but I think that's how we connected. I think I was like getting attacked by the PPC or something. And
Yep.
I can't remember exactly. And you kind of reached out to me and because you've
Well,
been
it
attacked
was
by them.
yeah. So you were getting attacked. I'm just trying to be careful how I word this. You were being attacked, and I contacted you, and it was also right around the time that the tide was turning in Saskatchewan as regards C-19, and some of the work that you were doing had a handle, or you had a hand in that. And I think that's where we met, was right around the turning of the tide here when it came to the lockdowns and everything.
And my
Yeah.
husband said, "Oh, follow Frank Vaughan because he used to follow you when he was still on Twitter. So you and him had interacted quite a bit." So
Yes.
he says, "So I think I was following you at the time, but yeah, it's funny looking back at how much has happened in the last little while, and
He's a
just
great guy, and he's missed. He's missed on Twitter. His presence.
I will tell you something in the messages. He may be back on Twitter, but
I don't want to say anything.
no, he's just waiting for the day when he's not a doctor anymore and can publicly speak to his political opinions. But you're going to see some stuff come up because he just did a petition for a referendum. So, and he's just
Yeah.
waiting for his MP to sign it. So I don't know if you've heard about this. So who knows? They might come after him for that, but they are allowed to have political opinions. It's just
Mhm.
certain topics are hard to discuss. So yeah, we'll see when that
He's a very
petition.
brave man. He's a very brave man. I appreciate him a lot.
He he's a really good man. He's not just a brave
Yep.
man. He's a really good man. I really won the lottery of husbands. So, and I don't think I'd be involved in politics at all if it wasn't for having met him because like I said, I was so oblivious to the way the world run and I would like say something. He's like, "Are you sure about that?" I'm like, "Well, no, I'm not." He's like, "Where did you find that?" And then he was kind of challenge me a little bit. And then I'd go and look at it. I'm like, "What?" Like so shocked by so much of the
And once you see it,
so much of
you can't unsee it.
yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So, but I'm thankful though that I was one of those that was brainwashed before because now when I see stuff, not just from the left, when I see some stuff from the right as well, there's a lot of bad
Yep.
stuff, fake stuff,
Yep.
brainwashing stuff on the right too. So when I
Mhm.
see it from both, so Chris Guy is a perfect example of that. So when I see stuff from the right, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to double check this. And like most of what I did during COVID was actually debunk stuff from both sides. So, and
Mhm.
I'm glad that I was brainwashed before. So because I have an open mind. Like yesterday, I had Franco on my show, and I had a major change in my perspective. Just even like we were talking about how much elected officials get paid provincially and stuff, and I'm like, well, I kind of want them to get paid more so we get more qualified people to run government, not these imbecile. And he says, well, if we had less government, you wouldn't need them to be as qualified because government wouldn't run very much. And I'm like, you make a very good point. So, but anyways, thank you so much for coming on. If you don't follow Frank, you can do so. Just go to his website, Frank Vaughan. Is that how you say it, Frank Vaughan?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
It's a
It's
miracle
spelled
you
like
got it right. And
Vaughan.
you managed to spell it right, so it's perfect.
Oh, I had to double check it. But yeah, if you don't follow him already, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My
It was
pleasure. I was glad to
a
be
great,
here. We'll do it
it
again.
was really good having you. Okay. You have a good day. We'll chat later. Wow. Okay. So yeah, if you don't follow Frank already, I highly recommend you do so. If you don't follow me, you can do so on Twitter, X, it's the same thing, X, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Although this live show is only on 4 of those platforms, I'm working on Instagram and TikTok. I'm struggling through it. But anyways, if you don't follow me there, I highly recommend you do set up notifications so you get notified of anytime I go live. I do a show daily, Monday to Friday. Usually it starts around 12. I try to start right at 12. I was 5 minutes late today, but I'm going to try to get better at that, have everything kind of ready to go. This is new though. I'm still learning. I'm still struggling through this process, but we're getting there. It's getting better. I was talking to my husband last night. I'm like, I really hope that once I get this like really under handle, I don't get bored of it. I have an ADHD type personality. So when I master something, I'm like, okay, I'm bored. I want to go master something else. But I don't think this is going to be it because I love talking to people. I love learning. I love kind of sharing my thoughts. And I've been doing that on Twitter for a while. So hopefully I won't get bored of it. Next week, so tomorrow will be like a regular episode. There's a lot to cover. I already have a lot bookmarked. So it'll be like a regular episode. I don't have yet scheduled guests for next week, but I may be getting Ruby Dalla to come on the show. So if you don't know who she is, she's running for the leadership of the Liberal Party. She she's been doing a lot of interesting posts, which makes me wonder. I don't think she's like currently, maybe in the past, I don't think she's your typical Liberal candidate. And I'm shocked if she does end up. I'll be shocked if she does end up. We're just trying to figure out what day will work. So, but I'm just looking up some posts here. She did a post. She's basically she said, "Here, I got to bring it up because I thought it was funny. I'm going to see if I can find it." She's like, "I'm the female version of Trump in Canada." I've got to find it if it's still there. Oh, it's not coming up. I don't know if it's still there. But anyways, so I'm working to see if we can get her on the show next week, preferably before the leadership race. I know a lot of a lot of conservatives told people to get memberships to the Liberal Party so they can have an influence on the leadership race. I wasn't one of those people. I didn't put it out there because one of the criteria to get memberships to the Liberal Party is you have to agree with their party like priority, what they stand for, which I don't think most of my listeners do. So I didn't feel right in my spirit to do that. But if she wants to come on the show, for those who did get a membership to the Liberal Party, and I actually had someone that I know personally who was running. So Mike Clark was running for the Liberal Party. So But yeah, I didn't feel right posting it publicly. So, but if she's willing to come, I would love to learn more about her. I don't want Carney to win. And if I was to handpick which one out of all of them that I think would be better, less destroying our country leader, I think she would fall into that. She's been strong on immigration. She's saying that she's going to protect gun rights. I know she's voted the other way before in the past, but I'm wondering if she's like an old school classical liberal more than the insane woke stuff that we've seen. And like like myself, some people can change their mind on things. So I used to be a liberal person. I used to vote left. So if I can change my mind, maybe she's one of those. Maybe she's going at this leadership race to try to influence change. I don't know, but those are all questions I would like to ask her. So maybe we'll see her next week. But I'm talking about next week because I may be heading to DC on Thursday. So next week, I may only have a show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I haven't booked my flights yet. I haven't fully decided. But next week is the CPAC conference in DC. Basically, it's the biggest conservative conference in the world. Happens next week in DC. So I was thinking of maybe going, maybe networking with some people. I have a few friends who are going. So I might be doing that. I haven't booked yet. I haven't decided. And the big reason I'm going is because I want to get more connections, more contact on people I can bring on the show. And because it's a worldwide conservative event, it's not just for Americans, it's also going to be from conservative around the world, and including Canadian conservative people. I thought it'd be a great opportunity. So I'm also going to the Canada Strong and Free Network conference in, I think it's in April. So yeah, I'll let you guys know next week. I might decide if I'm going to book or not today, but if I do that, that's Thursday and Friday. There won't be a show. So yeah, tomorrow regular at 12 o'clock. I will see you guys then. Have a good afternoon.